Hey, my name is Anne-Marie Duff, and I will very shortly be starting rehearsals for Little Foxes by Lillian Hellman that will be performing at the Young Vic Theatre. Today, I'm going to be talking about some past productions that I've worked on throughout my career. I've had a very swollen theatre career. I'm very, very lucky. I've worked with lots of amazing people. So, drum roll. Here we go. First one. Right, so this one is on a photograph. I worked, when I was a couple of years out of drama school, I went to Drama Centre and I worked with the theatre company called Shared Experience. They were famous for doing adaptations. One of the adaptations we did was of The Mill on the Floss, and the adaptation was done by Helen Edmondson. We took this production all over the world. We went to India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Germany, went to Hamburg, the Hamburg Women's Festival. It was the most extraordinary experience of my life. I grew up in a fantastically working class household, and I had not been anywhere further than Ireland in my life. And there I was on an aeroplane about to do the thing I love doing most, acting in Asia. So, I got on an airplane to do that, which was crazy and such a privilege. I learned so much on this job about emotional freedom and taking huge risks physically, and it was such a juicy time, so I really loved it. And Helen Edmondson is a brilliant adapter, she's such a good writer. So we were all very lucky, had lots of fun. So the second production that I'm going to be talking about is this a few years after, so maybe about 3 years after I worked on The Mill on the Floss. I worked on a two-hander, a play, an American play by Donald Margulies called Collected Stories with Dame Helen Mirren. So it was just me and her. So I was extraordinarily lucky, and terrified because it was a big old West Ender. And I predominantly work in subsidised theatre. I always feel like that's my home. So this was a whole new vibe for me, I was a bit daunted about it. But the director was the late and very great Howard Davies. And like a lot of actors, we would do anything to work with him. He was such a genius, and he made every single character in every play that he directed feel just as vital as the lead character. I had this real gift of being just fascinated by people and story. And working with Helen was so playful, and this is a side of her people don't really know, they don't get to see that she can be really giddy and very theatrical and really good fun. And it was the first time I ever got nominated for an award for acting. So that was kind of extraordinary, I'd never... And I look at myself now, I could be my own mother. It's nice. Yeah, so we got to play these two authors, and I've always been a massive bookworm. So playing a young writer was kind of like, I got to live my parallel fantasy life, so it was fantastic. And Donald was such a lovely writer, Again, you're just learning a bit more. This was less about being in my body, which it would have been with Shared Experience, and more into my noggin, in a different kind of acting, which is what you want, each job you do, you want it to be a big switch up. So next production, drum roll. What have we here? Now this was the first time I worked at the Young Vic. This is one of my favourite, I feel quite emotional talking about it. There were two plays that I always wanted to do when I was a teenager. One of them was St. Joan, and the other was The Daughter-in-Law by D.H. Lawrence. I'd seen a TV filmed version of it, I think with Billy Whitelaw when I was super young. And I remember thinking, God, that's incredible. And I love D.H. Lawrence, always have. So I worked on The Daughter-in-Law with Paul Hilton, the brilliant actor Paul Hilton. Matthew Dunster, who's now gone on to become a great director. Marjorie Yates, brilliant actress. And Annette Badland, star of Ted Lasso. David Land directed it. And it was just a very special time. And there's something about Lawrence that requires such a cellular truth. You can't escape from your sensuality. And I don't mean that in a cheap way. I mean that in every piece of your yearning is so connected with an invisible string to your objectives. And it's just so beautiful, and I felt so privileged to work with David on that as well, because I felt he loved that play. He got that play And working with Paul was a real gift. He's one of those actors that really makes you raise your bar. My gosh. And this theatre is so special, you know, and I just loved working here on that play. And we felt the audiences really connected with us as well. Supremely lucky, you know. It was so naturalistic. We had a live working range, so I could cook Paul his dinner on the stage and everything, and it was just beautiful. It was such a beautiful production. I'm very proud to have been part of it. Next one. As the time flies by, we fly forward in time to the next production, which is what I was just talking about. The other play that I'd always dreamed of doing, St. Joan, which I've talked about lots because it was a bit of a life changer for me. I got to work with Marianne Elliott, who is a genius. She's a genius, we all know it, she just is. It was in the Olivier Theatre, which was so perfect because it feels like a cathedral anyway. And you feel so connected to the higher energy in that space, which really helped me because some of those thoughts, you know, having to play that connection with your belief is a real challenge, especially we live in such a secular world, you know, it's such a real challenge to do it and it not feel a bit insincere or something. But in that space, you feel the clouds, you feel everything, you know. And I had, you know, I was raised Irish Catholic, and so I had this wealth of knowledge. I had this sort of parachute that was dragging along behind me, you know, that I could really, would help me fly, you know, and it was just me. Marianne made a very definite choice that there would be no other female characters. In the original play, there's a maid and blah, 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 who presumably would have been Joan's understudy, etc. But she made a very conscious decision that there would only be one female on the stage. So it was just me and this gang of men, which is kind of extraordinary, you know, that feeling. First very isolating, then suddenly I had to kind of assimilate, and my whole body shape changed. It was very interesting. And I'm like proper bird, but I became so sort of wiry and like a boy. It was really fascinating without even trying, you know. I found it so beautiful. I still remember huge passages of that play. It changed my life, it changed me as a storyteller. I hope it made me better at my job. I really worked my Danny boy off on that play, and I'm very proud to have been part of it. Everyone was extraordinary. What a cast, my gosh, so lucky. Finally, the last production that I've chosen. I mean, I could have chosen so many. I've been like riches. I've got like a treasure chest full of riches of productions I've worked on. But this one that I picked is The House of Shades, which we did at the Almeida. So many gorgeous pictures, oh my gosh. This play, I was supposed to do in 2020. And we were supposed to start rehearsals, I think at the 1st of April, something like April Fool's Day, something like that. And then COVID came along. I was devastated because it was one of the greatest pieces of writing I had read. Beth Steele wrote this play. For people who've never seen a production of one of her plays or have never read any of her prose, I beg you to just do something about that. She is remarkable. Her writing is so sexy and visceral and political and really daring. This was an incredibly daring production that the Almeida did. There were very serious topics that we addressed, not just the progression of Thatcherism and all of those topics, but also it was set in Nottingham, you know, and a lot changed in Nottingham over this period of time. The whole culture changed due to industries being closed down. But also it discussed the notion of a woman's right to choose or not choose or have these ideas imposed on them. The subject of backstreet abortions was brought up. And at that specific time in history, Roe versus Wade was being overturned in America. So we felt very connected to a huge, more universal story. I love playing this woman. She was... quite often you'll get these fantastic female roles in plays that are about women who haven't been given the opportunities or the oxygen mask, you know, so that they can breathe properly and thrive. And what does that do to you? So she was one of those women who potentially could have been extraordinary, but what had happened with all that energy was it kind of tied itself up in knots and just became quite destructive. And I think she's the darkest character I've ever played. Maybe until Little Foxes, we shall see. But Blanche McIntyre directed it, and she has this ability to be so forensic and really push you and push you and push you, but at the same time, the kindest director. And she's like, to look at, she's like Virginia Woolf. She looks like a classic sort of gorgeous Blue Stocking, you know, she's just incredible. And that was a really special production. None of us wanted it to end. And sometimes with subsidised theatre, you know, the runs are quite short and you don't want things to finish because they're so tasty, because that's where the tasty work is done, you know. The most daring, most interesting work is done in these kind of spaces, and that's what we all really crave. This is just 5 plays that I've worked on that I've loved, but honest to God, because I'm 153 years old, there's so many productions that I've just loved, and people I've loved working with. It's my crack cocaine, what can I tell you? I've been so lucky. I've worked in every medium, and not a lot of actors get to do that. They can kind of get stuck in a lane and they have to work on film sets or, you know. But I've been fantastically lucky. But the theatre is absolutely my most favourite place to be. There is nothing like a rehearsal room. It's really hard to describe to people who haven't shared that experience what it's like to be in a rehearsal room. It is one of the most precious, courageous places you can go, because people really reveal themselves to you. But also just standing on a stage in a dark room, telling people your version of a story, it's so extraordinary. And I think it really was highlighted during the lockdown, you know, when people couldn't be in spaces watching people publicly perform. But you can feel that you can change the temperature of a room by the way you say something or a gesture you make, and that is profound, and that's why I think it's my favourite version of my job, because there's just this constant, it's like rays that come off of you that you share with people. It's real human connection, it's proper communion, you know, it's like people sitting around a fire. We go into a dark place and there's light in front of us and someone tells us a story. It's so precious. When I'm not doing any theatre, I literally feel like I've got a limb missing. I feel like something's wrong here. And don't tell anybody, but if I could, I would only ever work in the theatre. But it's my favourite place to be, so yeah. So please, please come and see Lillian Hellman's extraordinary, daring play, Little Foxes, at the Young Vic from December till February next year. It's so seldom performed. You've got to see it while you can. And we have brilliant Lyndsey Turner directing, and yeah, I can't wait to share it with you. So please, please come.